Good morning, everyone. I feel privileged to be here and honored and so on, but I don't think I like following Jonah Berger. I don't know how many of you listened to him, but he was fabulous. And so much of what he has to say is going to be reflected in this consumer research. I feel kind of in a duality, if you will. Part of me wants to convince you why consumer research is really good, but I'm not going to push you. But what our consumer research did is it asked women, in this particular case, it was all women, it asked women about their pregnancy loss experiencing and specifically their abortion experience. Many of our questions were open-ended. We didn't provide options. We just asked them the question and we answered it. So in about a second or two, Nathan is going to be behind the scenes. He's going to do my slides for me. Trust me, if I tried to do it myself, I'd paralyze and I wouldn't give you the information that's on it. So you're going to not be able to see me in a couple of seconds, and you're going to see the data itself. Obviously, this goes without saying. I'm only one of 3 people from Support After Abortion that you're going to be hearing. This is really today's discussion. All of today's discussion is really on the history and background of abortion healing. And tomorrow will be the present and the future. And obviously, for our vision is to restore the world from the impact of abortion. There's me with my hair colored. We're going to change that. May 1, we're going to get new pictures. So obviously I am the founder and board chair of Support After Abortion, and I'm founder of Luncheons for Life. Support After Abortion really was birthed out of Luncheons for Life. Luncheons for Life has been around for about 8 years. We have 10 of them. And I probably go to 4 or 5 a month. So I hear everything that's going on in pro-life across 10 different geographies. Half of them are in Florida. The rest of them are in 4 other states if you count the metro area from Illinois and St. Louis. My background is I was a change agent. I read Jonah's book. I was in an airport several months ago, and that book just jumped out at me because that's what I did for a living. So my last 20 years of my corporate life in the financial services industry, I had 20 different jobs over 20 years. Most of them only lasted 9 months. Interestingly, I always called my work in that trimesters because that's the way I problem solved in 3-month increments. I've worked in the UK. I was in charge of international expansion for Spain. And my background is a lot of problem solving and management work, but mostly in business development or what I call corporate strategic marketing. And then I mentioned I've been 8 years in the pro-life industry. You know, interestingly, when I left 15 years ago, when I got early retirement, which was fabulous, I thought I'd never use these skills again. And now, and I'm very, very entrepreneurial. And so now I'm an entrepreneur for God. So what is consumer research? And consumer research is really kind of funny, and I'm glad Jonah brought up Procter & Gamble. It is looking at markets, understanding markets for the purpose of usually selling something into it, providing something to it. It's also for existing customers. And so really it's to understand the attitudes, needs, motivation, behaviors. You do it a variety of different ways. And we did 2 particular research. I think we can go to the next one. This is not, by the way, this varies very dramatically from what you all are pretty much probably aware of, which is more clinical research. And there's a plethora of that from a lot of great providers. This, from my perspective, I was interested in finding the marketing hotspots for where we could really sell into, if you want to say it for lack of a better word. And we did 2 studies. We did call it reproductive loss. The first study, we had 1,000 women, countrywide from the United States that represented the census data from the United States. Unfortunately, it produced an awful lot of information on other reproductive loss like miscarriage and stillbirth and even adoption, and much less on abortion. So the second study that we did, which was another 2,000 women, we really wanted to focus on abortion. So between the first and the second study, we talked to 200 women across the United States that said they had had an abortion. We did it using standard methodology. We used a research company in Oklahoma City that is well-versed in doing that, members of the Research Management Association and the like. So to distill it, I can tell you, I can show you a 300-page book, so I'm going to distill it because we're not going to take that out. We asked people where they would go for help with their reproductive loss, and this is women with abortion. So, but that was the way the question was phrased, and this is the abortion-only subset. 90% said they didn't know where to go, and even more so from the same amount from the Catholic respondents. We asked how often people attended religious services. 80% said rarely or never. And of the Catholic respondents, it was even more, probably because of the belief system involved. Many of these women claimed to be Christian, but they clearly were not going to religious services. I think that's really important because if you listen to Jonah, we have to meet people where they are and not just give them our argument. And our argument is, well, you know, maybe whatever the gospel-led message is that maybe they don't want to hear. And in this particular case, they were probably less likely to want to hear that. The other piece that, again, meeting people where they are, that came out very, very loud and clear is it is very important, and from the women that we talked to, these 200 women, that the anonymity is really important to them. So I mentioned to you that there were nearly 200 personally experienced abortion. 40 of them were Catholic. I thought that was important because the Catholic Church is very well organized and has a couple of programs that they feel really, they're diverse, but they feel really strongly about them. And I thought it was really important to enlighten if there was any other truths that were going on in that. And by the way, in wanting to do this research, part of it came from the knowledge that we either had a marketing problem or a product problem or both. And that's the other thing that marketing research gets at, much like the Tide Pods. You know, that's how they came up with those kinds of things. In acknowledging the adverse change, we just asked flat out, you know, did you have an adverse change from this? And 21% said of all response on the low side said yes. I think it's higher because there's some other questions that alluded it could be as high as a third. And then the Catholic respondents, they said less. And again, I think that's part of the belief system of having to convince that, gee, there's no problem here. And of course, they acknowledge that they didn't seek help. And then there's that 33% number and the 43% number that could have benefited from help or they didn't answer the question. So that's where I come up with a range of there's up to a third of those that have had abortions may be likely to seek help if they knew where to find it. This is, they call them verbatims. When we asked the question about the adverse change, we asked what was that adverse change? And these are the word, in a word cloud, you take, the bigger the word is there, the more it was said by a respondent. So guilt, regret, physical change, depression, feelings of loss were very, very big. And I'm just going to read you a couple of them because I think this kind of answer gives life to the numbers. And these are probably things that you've heard before, but I'll say them again. It affected me because it was first painful to go through. Second, has changed my body a lot. Feeling resentful and angry for a while, spiraled out of control. Thinking about children more, weight loss, sadness, guilt, shame, depression. That person is me, and it's been over 20 years since I had the abortion, and it still hurts me a great deal. I think this is particularly important, not just the verbatims, but the research itself as it really debunks the myth that people aren't feeling pain from their abortion. Another one, I had a son die at only 16. I cried daily, feel that I may have been cursed for having the abortion. Also, one of my children was taken from me due to it. Then we asked, where would you go for help? Or who would you ask for help? And you'll see here that number one answer was friend. I'll ask a friend to tell me where I need to go. And unfortunately, clergy, not so much. So we have a lot of work to do as it relates to building compassion as one of our first pillars, as you know, C for us. Then we asked about a preferred resource, and again, non-faith-based, unfortunately, is overwhelming. But again, remember, these people are not attending, these women are not attending religious services. They could feel alienated. Maybe the churches they belong to are judgmental. So we talk about going from condemnation to compassion, and that's what's really coming out of all this information. I wonder what the sex of my baby would have been. The guilt still sometimes haunts me. The word haunt came up often too, believe it or not. I wonder what his or her life would be like today, which I think from this, hold on to this verbatim. Remember the play Viable is actually is a journey of a woman who will meet her daughter in a fictitious way 30 years later. So we're anxious for that. Where to go for after abortion care. We say 9 out of 10 don't go, because I don't think, I mean, Planned Parenthood is not providing healing programs. But it's sad that they're going to come, so that an entity that doesn't provide healing shows up more frequently than all of the other, we'll call them the good guys, all the other programs combined. And we talked about this, the going major holidays or never attending religious services. Another good verbatim, she came a different person after this. She's not as friendly. Now, this is somebody that looks like a friend. That was part of the initial study, if you knew somebody that had an abortion. And I think these verbatims are good too, because other people are watching behaviors that you may not even know that you have, or the person that's had an abortion. She was not as friendly to me and my family. When anyone talked about babies, she left the room, became antisocial, and wouldn't talk to anybody. We know that. We see this all the time. So this is just collaborating or corroborating information. So I think I've said most of this, but we do want to debunk the myth that few are hurt, and we think there are millions. I'm going to show you a great slide. The shift of paradigm and how we approach abortion healing. As you know, you've heard Support After Abortion say this often, but we think that women and men need options. And that's exactly what Jonah was saying. It's not our way or the highway, or they're just going to push back, or they're just going to go back into their shell. Many people need a healing are outside the church, whatever the church is. But I would say that anything that we can do as an industry to heal, we're going to increase the ranks in the pews, or increase the attendance in the pews. Anecdotally, we know that to be true. And change the narrative and focus on the person in need of healing, rather than, we say, people before programs, really trying to meet people where they are. And ultimately, the bottom line is to create capacity. And I'm going to show you I think the big slide is coming up here. Well, we know this slide's a little bit different than the ones you might have seen in the other two virtual conferences that we had, because we've moved along. The Healing Partner Network is, we had one yesterday, a meeting, and we had people from as far away as New Zealand, a lot of friends from Canada and across the United States, where we're just, creating an environment where people can talk about what's going on, what they're doing, what are some best demonstrated practices. And then Viable to Play, I mentioned that earlier. It's a off-Broadway play. It'll be debuting for us in Jefferson City on the 13th, I believe. It's a Wednesday in April. It'll be on the Capitol steps. That's Jefferson City, Missouri. The curriculum to Hope and Healing is our non-gospel-led message booklet, and that is out and about. It's available from us, and you can get through the Word Among Us. The men's version, it should be out shortly, and then we'll have a Spanish version as well. We have been, and Nathan is doing a presentation later today on the men's task force. And then we will be doing that same consumer research that I just presented to you. Will be done exactly the same way, in the same format, with the same questions on a men's market. And we started that a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't get an update from Bill Shepard Research in Oklahoma City. He will be doing that for us again. And then ultimately, we're going to do YouTube video advertising in selected markets, because if we can build capacity in certain markets, then we can go out with an advertising campaign to drive people to locations, or to telephone or chat or whatever. Okay, so this is the the impact of abortion in the US. For those of you that are seeing us internationally, I'm sorry, it's hard enough to focus on the US, but I think this is called a gap analysis. And what it means is that it's the difference between demand and then basically delivery. And so essentially I took from the census data, the number of men and women, now this is all people from 18 to 24, I used 1 out of 4 because that's the number that we know that will have an abortion by the time they're 45. That number could be bigger. And of those that were likely to seek help, I took the 21 or 22% of that number. And then the likely to seek help is 10.6 million minimally. I had to take a little bit of license with men because we don't have that research yet. So I used the same number. It could be less, could be more. We'll find out shortly. And then this is the true gap analysis. This is we said the ones that were likely to seek help is 10.6 million. And I looked at churches in the United States, at Catholic churches, regular churches, the number of healing programs. I really kind of had to do like a swag analysis on this, but giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. I think this is a high number, but let's just say it's accurate. That 54,000 men and women are being healed in the United States right now from the impact of the abortion. And even if that's true, it's 0.5% of those that would be likely to seek help. And that's just directly. This isn't even talking about the number of men and women that are grandparents or they took the woman to the clinic, or this has to do with just those that are directly impacted. So that 50 million could be much higher as well. So that was quick. I did that in 17 minutes. 20 minutes was what I was shooting for. So we have plenty of time for questions or comments or whatever you want to say. Maybe I'll ask you a question. What strikes you about this information? What's surprising to you, or what is, not surprising?
So this is Nathan, our conference host, and the voice on the radio will be using the chat feature or the Q&A feature to take your questions for Janine.
I am not, where is it? It's on chat or is it on your Q&A? Okay, here we go. I joined a little late, so I have a question on 1/2 and 1%. Sure. What is it? Do you want to know how I came to it? I took, I took a fraction of just about everything and said if there's 300,000 churches in the world and they're in the US, and 10% of them had healing programs and X number could be healed. I took 200 programs that we know that are in the United States. I took and gave them something like 60 healing per year each. And then I had another number of independent healing people across the country, and then gave them something like 16. I took the 1,000 pregnancy centers that are in the United States that we know have healing programs and gave them 16 each. So it was really trying to dimension where there's healing capacity and giving the benefit of the doubt on a high side. And then I using with Project Rachel, I said that 75% of the dioceses in the United States have healing programs, and I gave them something like 40. So it was really just, I call it a swag, and I call it a high size swag, but we don't know that number. And there's no central place where people are reporting abortion healing numbers. So that it truly was just taking something and doing it on a high side. And then the other piece of that was really using the research to dimension the size of the market of people who would be willing to seek help. And that was where the 10.6 came from. So the denominator was 10.6 million, the numerator was 50-some thousand. Were women in the West Coast included in the research? Absolutely. The research was taken based on census data from the United States. So the population that was polled represented what women in America look like by geography, by race, and by religion, and by age. I see you're seeking is there info I can give to my ex-husband on this? I'm going to let that part I'd really Nathan or maybe you can answer that.
Hi, Janine. So
yes.
I think the question is the person able to give the survey to her ex-husband? And I don't believe that's how the survey works. We don't hand out the survey to individuals. Yeah. Maybe you could just speak to how that works.
Yeah, if it's if you do something like that, you're gonna load the research. So, and you're not going to get accurate information. And that's sometimes what's the problem in clinical research, because you're looking for people who are willing, like that maybe they'll come to someplace and you do focus groups. So we don't load it that way. We really do want to see how many people that we didn't know that these people had abortions. Let's put it that way. That's why we had to do a second research, because we stopped at 1,000, but 70% of the people that talked to us were people that either had miscarriage or they knew someone with miscarriage. So we only screened out for that in the second research, but it's not a survey. It's not like a survey that you hand out. It's actually done by phone, by cell phone, and by internet. So that's people that sign up that want to be part of research. But those people don't even know what kind of research they're going to be participating in. Was it received healing or sought counseling before abortion? It was, the question was asked, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was moreover, from the women that had abortion, we asked them if they sought healing or sought counseling, and that's where the answer was no. What has been the response reaction to the take-homes of the consumer research from Wisdom? I don't know what take-homes is. What are clergy saying about it? Well, we have 2 clergy on our board. We have Pastor Mark Little, who's African American, lives in California and sometimes in DC, and we have a priest, and I think you saw him on the. He did the invocation at the beginning of the conference today. I think they are not surprised. So, and I think anyone who I've talked to isn't surprised so much either.
Janine, I'm going to come alongside you, and we have a question through the Q&A that I'm just going to read for the audience. It says, the need for anonymity is extremely high. How is support after abortion addressing this? How can those of us in the field address this as well?
Well, as you know, Pam, like we do some of our own in-house intake, if you will, and support groups. So we do a lot on the internet, which provides a lot of anonymity. But I think moreover, we're promoting what we know works to anyone who will listen. I think that, everybody has to take this away in their own particular way and look at what they're doing. And I heard so much when we started to do this, people were saying, well, and I'm going to use Project Rachel as an example. People were saying, why aren't people coming? I talk to people all the time and they don't want to come. And these are people that are inside the church, and it may very well be they want that anonymity. So I think everyone looks at their programs that they have and say, if I want to serve more people, I need to meet people where they are. And maybe their programs or their counseling do that. Our observation is that's rare. Our observation is these are largely Bible studies or retreats, and people are out in the open. And they often are leading with a very, very heavy gospel-led message, and sometimes people aren't ready for that. It's despite the success of a lot of the programs, they are successful, but if we're only serving 0.5% of 1% of those that are likely to want help, then I don't think we're doing a very good job, especially when 9 out of 10 women either say Planned Parenthood or they don't know where to go for help after abortion or support after abortion. Somebody wrote, some pastors think that they will hurt women by sharing sermons from the pulpit. I encourage pastors to share because healing will come from discussing in a loving manner, more from the pulpit. Do you know, Walter Hoy was on he was on our first presentation. Walter said, and don't forget, many, especially not necessarily Catholic, but many Protestant ministers have a board to respond to. And if they're in a very heavily abortion impacted congregation, they can lose their job. So I think there's a lot of forces that impact how often that's being shared from the pulpit, not to mention political ones. But this research didn't address that. That's just a personal opinion from Janine Marrone. Will you make this specific data available to those in the conference today? Would SA try to collect number of those going through healing programs? That's a good question. I can't answer that. That's for the management of support after abortion. I wouldn't even know. I mean, I wouldn't even know how large a staff you would need to try and figure that out. It probably does need to be done. Or you just end up doing what I did anyway. You take a sample size of each one of the categories and then you apply it to the whole. I mean, there are ways to do it. That research did address that most are not attending church, so just preaching from the pulpit isn't going to reach them. So that's a good point. But who it will reach are, I mean, one thing that I'm finding just from my own parish and other Catholic churches that I go to is we have to build compassion for those that are in the pews, because the abortion is murder narrative is so strong that we need to move from condemnation to compassion. And Lisa can talk to you about how much we've seen of that. We're viewed as not being pro-life because we're promoting healing. So, I mean, think about how ridiculous that is. Just a comment, many pastors have had abortions with their wife, and sometimes it is more successful to meet with pastor's wife, but it can be difficult for them personally as well in their role with their church members. And I'll say, Martha, who said that, great observation. And anecdotally, Catherine Davis, who's going to be part of this, she did, through her restoration project, she did these things called pastors' wives' teas, and they were wildly successful, but she didn't come in with the title abortion. It was more on like issues in the family or something like that. And then she came in with a lot of abortion discussion, and she'll tell you this better than I, but every tea that she did, several of them whispered to her afterwards that they had had an abortion. So somehow we have to find a way to promote healing at that level, because you're right, because Catherine will say, if you want to get to a pastor, you need to go through their wife, but you're right, they have had abortions. Am I missing anything else, Nathan? Kind of went through those.
Looks like you have everything addressed. So if you'd like to add any wrap-up comments, you can, or a final question for Janine. If not, we'll bring the presentation to a close. Janine, maybe just a closing word about when the men's research might be available.
I think it's going to be about 6 weeks, Nathan. We're about 4 weeks into it, and I know they began it. I'm so curious. I can't believe that I waited this long not to say, well, what are you hearing? My guess is, and just in getting to the 3,000 women that talk to us, you all know what it's like to do research. It's hangups. It's hangups, or I'm not interested, or whatever. We went through 10,000 women across the nation to get to the 3,000 that would talk to us. I don't know what that percentage is going to be for men, but I have a sense that less men are going to want to talk about this than women did, because women are more talkers. So I don't have any information yet, but I'm hopeful within 6 weeks we'll have something, and it'll be groundbreaking. And of course we'll do a podcast on it and do everything else. But I'm anxious. I hope we don't have to do what we did in the first one, because this is not cheap. I kind of anticipated on the first one because it was such a new concept of doing it. And we didn't even know how to ask the question. That's why we did the reproductive loss. So I'm hoping we don't have to go into a second study, but that's also possible as well. But we did learn a lot from the first one with women, but unfortunately it was mostly on miscarriage.
Okay, so with that, there's no more questions. We just appreciate everyone joining us today. Thank you, Janine, so much for presenting.
You're welcome.
And we encourage everyone to join us on the next session.